It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Ryan, I'm really excited about this show because, people know oftentimes we talk about the stock market or mutual funds or that type of investing. And a lot of people have been saying to us, you guys don't ever really weigh in a ton on real estate investing. You talk a lot about like personal finance and how to think about making wise decisions when it comes to like buying a house, but you never talk about it as an investment piece.
Let's jump into the first thing I kind of want to cover is the 3 myths about real estate investing.
Yeah, I think when a lot of folks think about real estate, the first thing that comes up is the YouTube video of the guy telling you how you're going to go be the gazillionaire investing in real estate and it's so easy, just do these things and you're going to knock it out of the park. And unfortunately, we don't think that that's necessarily a true statement.
Well, the term passive in real estate, it makes my hair stand up on my arms a little bit because a lot of people, I think they have this visual that they're going to go to the mailbox, pull out a check and go, oh, it's my monthly rent check from my loving tenants that love my rental property. And you go to all these YouTube videos out there where there's all these people that are pushing real estate and they all have sales systems. That's what I think is awesome. And I always ask myself, if real estate, by the way, real estate is this good, but why are they doing a sales system versus just going and buying more real estate for themselves? It's the same thing with trading strategies on the stock market, by the way. For anybody who says, why aren't y'all poking fun at yourself? I'll poke fun at people that come up with trading strategies and try to sell you their system on that because I always think the same thing there. Why aren't they going out there and implementing them themselves? It must be more profitable to sell the system than it is to actually do the system is what I always think to myself.
The truth of the matter is, even if you're someone who does find that deal where you do get to experience that mailbox money thing, where you just go to the mailbox, the rent's coming in, you probably had to do some due diligence on the front end to figure out the property that you're going to buy, the kind of tenants you're going to have, what sort of deal you're going to enter into. It certainly, when you made the decision to get into the investment, wasn't something that was passive.
Yeah, if you're doing real estate right, it is definitely not a passive entity. You are actively engaged, just like you said, even if it's buying into like a private deal, you're going to do your research and make sure that you're not just flopping along, putting your money in first place that sells you something.
The second myth that we think is true about real estate is that it doesn't take a lot of money. You tell people all the time, or you hear people say all the time, oh, well, it only takes a little bit of money in real estate to make a lot of money in real estate.
Yeah, there's so many systems, I'll say it again, where they say, no money down, come to our seminar, come to our thing, and we'll show you how to do this. The problem is that when you do real estate right, you know that things are going to go askew from time to time. You're going to have vacancies. You're going to have tenants that tear junk up. You're going to have periods of time where you also just need general maintenance. You have to put roofs on real estate. You have to also pay property taxes on things. There's all kind of things like that. That's going to require some cash. And don't even forget you have to put down usually 20 to 25%. In most cases, banks, if you're going to pay low interest rates, they're going to require some skin in the game. So to say that you can do this with no money down, it seems a little fishy to me.
In most circumstances, when it comes to real estate investing, depending on the type you're doing, it's a lot of times illiquid. So even if you needed to get to the money, you can't get to it. So, we're fortunate that we get to work with clients all over the country, and a number of them have been successful in real estate. The one common thread I would say is none of them did it with very little money involved.
I definitely agree with that. And then the last thing we had is real estate always goes up.
Yeah, this is one that's really frustrating. And I feel like this is one we used to hear a lot. We stopped hearing it, and I'm starting to kind of hear whispers about this again.
Well, pre-2008, it was just kind of known within investor folklore that God doesn't make more real estate, so it can't go down.
That's right.
I mean, that's what got us into the financial crisis of 2008 is that people were thinking, you can just pay whatever for real estate and it won't matter. But we quickly found out after 2008, 9, and 10, it does matter what you pay. Matter of fact, probably the biggest component of success in real estate is the purchase price. So you might as well make sure you understand that.
And the thing I think you would even said when it comes to real estate investing, and 2008 was a great example. A lot of times when you invest in the stock market, even if there's a pullback or a downturn, it's like this V-shaped recovery where it hits the bottom, it can bounce back really quickly. With real estate, that's not always the case. A lot of time, it's more of a U-shaped recovery. It goes down. It can hang out in the bottom for a while before you actually start to see some of that recovery take place.
Well, that ties into the liquidity, how efficient the markets are. Definitely something you need to take into account. So we talked about the 3 myths with real estate, but I want to kind of pivot and talk about what makes real estate investing so powerful.
Because it is a good thing.
Yeah.
And we've actually seen this manifest, again, across a number of our clients who've had a lot of success, and it is possible to build a lot of wealth investing
So I
in
want
real
to kind of
estate.
talk about the superpowers, the special go-juice for real estate. The first thing is what I like to call leverage growth through debt.
I think this is probably maybe the most powerful part of real estate investing and why a lot of people get so attracted to it.
But there's one scary thing. I use the word leveraged, which is also equated to debt. And we know debt, just like a sharp knife, it is a tool that is quite dangerous. But we want to create an example to show people what we mean when we say the power of leveraged growth.
So let's walk through a little bit of a case study. So let's say that you have a guy, Joe, again, that's an intern Daniel name that he came up with, buys a $150,000 house and he decides he wants to put down 20% down because he's a smart financial decision maker. So he puts down $30,000. The house grows at 4% per year, and after 10 years, it's worth $223,625.
So pause. So this is actually an asset, $150,000 asset that's growing at 4% a year.
Yep.
Now, from an asset class perspective, 4% a year, that's barely above inflation because inflation's 2.5% to 3%. So this is not something, I mean, there wasn't too many years ago, cash was doing 4%. So that doesn't get you excited, but you're like, well, wait a minute. How do so many people get so excited about real estate on something that's only growing at 4%?
The answer is the power of leverage growth because Joe now has a gain of $73,625. He was actually able to turn the $30,000 investment he put down into almost $104,000, which is an overall gain of 245% or about 12.5% per year.
So you can quickly see you have turned something that is a 4% slow growth asset into a better than, I mean, that's a really good rate of return at 12.5%. That's what leverage does for you. It essentially elevates at a multiple factor your rate of return. Now there is, I even tried to tell Daniel, he's like, there's no room for us to put that on the slide where I wanted to put a big asterisk because there's a big component that's missing here. There's finance costs.
Sure.
So there's a lot of interest that's accruing in the background. There's property taxes. There's a lot more that's going on. But from a simplicity standpoint, we want to tell you there is a component of this that people like leverage growth because it gives you a multiplier on your growth. Now, we'll get to the negative parts later, but you at least need to know that.
There are a lot of different ways to invest in real estate that I bet most folks, even most of the Money Guy family, probably don't realize they're real estate investors, even when they didn't know they're real estate investors.
Yeah. The easiest, lowest lying fruit, and we did this on purpose, is home ownership.
Yep.
Home ownership is the majority of us, that's how we're doing real estate investing. And you think about it, here's some stats. And by the way, we used median numbers, not the average, because I know a lot of you guys, whenever we do the shows and we talk about average, you pick on us a little bit. So we used median numbers on this. The median net worth for Americans that are over 18 is $136,000 a year. The net worth, median net worth excluding their home is only $55,000.
So total net worth was $136,000, but you take the home out, it was only about $55,000.
So if you finish the rest of that, that means 59% of a lot of people's net worth is tied up in their personal residence. It is their biggest asset.
And your personal residence, surprise, surprise, is a piece of real estate.
Yep.
That actually is. Now, we don't call homes investments. We like to call them use assets. But the fact of the matter is, it is a real estate investment.
And then I kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the huge tax benefits that also occur with your home ownership. Do you guys realize if you live in your house, your primary residence, for 2 out of the last 5 years, and it could be even less than that if you get relocated for work or other things, up to $500,000 of your gains are completely tax-free.
I think, Brian, in the tax game, that's one of the most amazing tax tricks that there is out there. I can't think of another type of investment that allows you to shield that much capital appreciation.
So $250,000 for single taxpayers, $500,000 for married filing jointly. This benefit is so good that I know quite a few builders. Pretty much 2/3 of them move every 2 years.
And you might be saying, well, why wouldn't they just build a house that they love? And why wouldn't they just build it and stay in there and, let the grass grow and the trees grow? It's because of this huge tax benefit.
I don't know if I would wish this tax benefit upon myself because I hate moving so much, but I have watched my personal builder for my house here in the Franklin, Nashville area. I mean, I think he's on his third house since I've known him.
Yep.
And he just keeps doing it and think about it. If you can do 500, if you're in a fast growing economy where assets are appreciating, plus you can build a house substantially cheaper than what market is because they're building it at cost.
Yeah.
There's going to be some huge gains there. He probably realistically is getting a $250,000 a year tax-free benefit. Because if you think about a married couple, $500,000 tax-free, that is huge. Because ordinary income, I'd have to make a lot of money to generate $500,000 of tax-free.
I think if number one, primary home ownership was the easiest one, I'd say passive via the portfolio is probably the second easiest one, right? That's what most people have. And this is exactly what it sounds like. This is buying stocks or mutual funds or ETFs that invest in real estate holdings, whether it be real estate investment trusts or other types of real estate. But these are publicly traded real estate investments that you can go out in your brokerage account and buy.
Let's talk about the third way. Now, this is the one that's kind of juiciest because we had home ownership was number one. Second easiest was probably just passive real estate, like in a mutual fund, ETF, something like that. The third is the one that you see all the marketing systems on.
This is the sizzle.
Residential rental property.
Yeah, these are the folks who say, you know what, I'm going to become the land baron and I'm going to become the real estate maven, the tycoon, and I'm going to have this entire real estate portfolio. I'm going to make a gazillion dollars.
Mailbox money.
Make mailbox money, renting real estate to other folks.
And it does, but I got to tell you, it's far from passive. We've covered this previously, but I think it's worth repeating. There's so many components when you get into residential rental property. It's purchase price, occupancy. Are the quality of the tenants, and the consistency? Are you going to need to take in reserves for vacancies? There's so many things. How much you need to require. You got to have reserves for cash in the bank for months between tenants, general repairs, overhaul expenses. Good part of this, if you're thinking about maintenance, is just you have to put carpet and paint.
So if you have good tenants.
The reality is that good, it goes way beyond the good because there's cabinets, sheetrock, fixtures. You'd be surprised at how hard your tenants can be on the property. So let's go through the pros and the kind of the cons of residential rental property. So the first is that you are buying an appreciating asset with other people's money. That sounds awesome. That's in the brochure.
Yep.
Because it's great. You're collecting the mailbox money by collecting the rent, and you're paying the mortgage with that money. You are paying for an appreciating asset. It's going up in value with other people's money. And then think about this. Once the mortgage is paid down, got a nice annual cash flow. There's a lot of people thinking this is going to be their pension.
This is their pension. That's exactly right.
To get this cash flow coming in. It's leverage growth. We've already talked about that. If you want to know how you turn a 4% asset, annual appreciating asset, into 12.5% over 10 years, it's through leverage growth, using that debt to take a down payment, but then let it be amped on the total net, the appreciation of a much bigger asset. That's powerful stuff.
And can I tell you the one thing I think that gets me the most frustrated when I talk to clients who want to go start investing in single family homes? Generally, this is the way the conversation goes. Man, we've been doing so well. Income is really high. Man, I need some deductions. So I need to go buy some residential rental properties because I need to start finding some losses. I need to start getting some deductions so I can offset. How many times do you hear that in the course of a year?
It's in the brochure. But they don't notice that asterisk that says, you realize once your income is over $150,000, we're not going to let you take these deductions necessarily. You have to start accruing them. So not only are you losing money on this investment, especially during a down economy, you can't even take the deduction out. So pay attention to that stuff. So here's the negatives. You have to deal with tenants. They're not usually the most financially responsible people. I'm just being honest with you.
Not in most circumstances, but a lot of circumstances, the reason people are renting, there's some reason they're renting. Maybe they're short term. Maybe they're not sure if they're going to be settled. Maybe they couldn't go buy something. You probably, if you're going to have a residential rental property, you need to know how you're screening the folks that you're going to let live in and be in that rental property.
You definitely need to be involved. You need to be an active landlord.
Once again, how it's not passive.
And you also have to be responsible for the repairs, the bills, keeping tenants, and making monthly mortgage payments. None of that. I mean, you can set it on autopilot, but there's going to be things that come up on a Thursday night that's going to require some attention.
But I hear people, then people all the time, well, no, I don't have to worry about that. I'll just have a management company. I'll just hire a management company, and they'll take care of all that part.
And that potentially could make it much more passive, but the problem with a management company is they usually take 10, I've even seen as high as 15% of gross rent.
Sure.
And that truthfully is kind of the
eat
cream.
a lot of the profit,
That's where the profit lies. So you got to pay attention to that. And then I put this as a negative, leveraged asset. Remember how I told you it was a positive, that it's growing. It's just how you turn a 4% asset into a double-digit growing asset. But it also is one of those things that could get very expensive very quickly, because a lot of times when you see real estate systems, they're not telling you to go buy one house. They're trying to tell you to get to that critical mass. You want to get 10 houses. You want to get to 20 houses. The problem is that when economies go down, they don't typically, it's not all in a vacuum. You will see that you won't have just one house that's sitting vacant. You might have 5 houses sitting vacant. And it could really, that leverage debt starts weighing on you really quickly. It multiplies.
So one of the questions, Brian, we talk about this whenever we counsel business owners. We always talk about what's the expected outcome you think, what's your best case, what's your worst case. We do that with rental property too. We always tell someone, what if you get your tenant in their very first month, they tear the place up, and then it sits empty for 12 months? Do you have the cash reserves? Do you have the wherewithal to be able to weather that? If you don't, maybe you don't need to be entering into those waters.
I'll say it this way. If you're doing rental property and you're broke on the front end, this is going to be your way to build wealth, but you haven't had wealth yet. This is a recipe to be a financial victim. So just be very careful. Real estate is outstanding, but it's kind of like you hear people say, banks never want to lend money to people who need the money. They only want to lend money to people who already have the money. Real estate is kind of one of those sweeteners you put on if you have, like I said, girth to the net worth, and you can let this thing build upon the leverage growth opportunity there. Let's talk about multifamily rental properties. So what's the pros and cons of multifamily? Because if you're not doing single, maybe you said, well, instead of buying 5 rental houses, single family rental homes, why don't I just do a duplex or a quadplex or something like that? Let's just go ahead and knock this out. And I'll go ahead and tell you, here's a little real estate hack that I love, because it saves you money on your mortgage rate. It also lets you be an active participant and keep an eye on the tenants. Is what if you do, and we have clients that have done this, what if you start your rental portfolio with a duplex or a quadplex where you actually live on the property?
Love it.
I mean, that is...
Makes it really easy to keep an eye on tenants.
That is a great way. You keep an eye on things. You get, like I said, lower mortgage rates. It really is an incredible thing, and it allows you to increase the return through economies of scale, because now instead of having 4 pieces of property that you have to go cut the grass on, or make sure the grass is being cut on, make sure the repairs, you can now have one location that has multiple people, multiple families all there. You also concentrate the repairs and maintenance. It's just a lot of good things. Now, the negatives is it's probably going to require a larger purchase price. That means bigger down payment. It's going to be a leveraged asset risk is going to go up even higher, because you're dealing with bigger numbers. The bigger the number, the bigger the risk. Better rate of return, though. So it is one of those things you're balancing out. And then the last category I put on residential real estate was old vacation rental property. And we've done so many Ask the Money Guys, because this is something I know a little bit about, is because the brochure on this.
How do you know a little bit about vacation rental property?
Because I fell prey to the brochure, is the fact that I'm going to go buy beach property that I can take my family down to, and then use other people's money to pay the mortgage on this thing. What could go wrong? I mean, this just sounds awesome. We'll go down to this awesome place. What you don't know, here's the cons. You only get to use the property during off season.
Because the rent's so good in the on season.
Yeah, because you have so many people want to rent. It's too profitable, and the season's too short for you to be using it during the peak season. So you actually never get to go to the property during peak season. Off season, the property is likely to just sit there vacant. You are lucky if you get a snowbird in your beach property during the winters. And your family vacations resemble off-season repair and maintenance sessions more than they do a vacation.
So, like you go to the beach and you get to replace the couch. Or
you get to work on sheetrock. You get to paint. And this is more if you're more wired like I am.
Come on, kids, let me teach you something.
My buddies, I'll tell you, I go on an annual golf trip every year. The trip started with me loading them up, telling them we'll go down to Florida and play golf, but we'd actually end up replacing mattresses, hanging TVs on the wall, painting things. It's really laughable. Now this thing has continued, and I've sold the property, so it's truly turned into a golf trip with my former neighbors. But it was for all too often. I'm sure these guys were like, wait a minute, there's a reason that he's not charging us to be down here. So it is one of those things. And then tenants are really rough on short-term rentals now, because I know a lot of people out there talking about VRBOs and other things but if people, we make the joke that treat it like you rent it, and that means you're ragging it pretty hard, and you'd be surprised at, it was not uncommon. We had to replace couches, mattresses, and everything every 2 to 4 years. A mattress that would last 10 years in your primary residence, you're going to replace every 2 to 4 years in a rental property. And
then I think this is the one that I hear all the time, Brian. I'll have a client say to me, I take the family on vacation. We go to the beach every single year. Rather than just throwing that money away, why wouldn't I just buy a vacation home? And that way we can go there. We can build memories on home. What I usually try to do is say, well, let's look at how much you're going to be spending on that to buy it, upkeep. You could probably spend a lot less money just renting and going on vacation and changing the locations you get to go to and going on different types of vacations. While that sounds good in theory, it's a way to justify going on vacation, a lot of times in practice, it doesn't actually make the most sense.
Yeah, it likely is going to be cheaper. Now, I know there's going to be people out there say, I bought a house in 2010 that is just a peach. You bought property in 2010.
That's right.
It's back to the whole thing with real estate. A lot of your success with real estate is when you bought. If you bought at the downside of that where the market got crushed in 2008, 9, 10, 11. If you bought then, you probably did great. I have a client who's going to watch this. He's a podcast guy, and he's done. When I saw his net worth, and I was like, wow, you bought all this in 2010? He goes, it's great, isn't it? So, it is one of those things where all those negatives I said, if you got it right, but that's when I see real estate's had such a great run, be careful, guys, because that purchase could be it's scary.
Yep.
Number 4, commercial real estate. You're thinking, well, I don't want to deal with the headaches of people living there, because people could do all kind of weird stuff. They could tear it up. But surely commercial property, having a CPA in my office building, what could go wrong with that?
They're running a business. They want to make sure it stays looking nice.
Because that's in the brochure on the pros, is that you're going to have stable tenants that pay decent rent with automatic increasers built in there. And I got to... I'm sure our landlord, I think he likes us.
Oh, I'm sure.
Because we are good tenants.
Yeah.
We are, every year there's an elevation in what we pay. Heck, I pulled a paper towel out of the commode today from, another business is in the building. So I'm kind of like a handyman that's doing stuff for him. I've fixed the commode at least 3 times. So there's stable tenants and good tenants. That's a good thing. And you can build large equity asset with other people's rent money.
100%.
So once again, there's another benefit using leveraged asset with other people's money. This is sounding pretty good. Yep. And then there's also, and this is another hack, maybe like owner tenants get better rates because the banks, once again, it's less on the risk profile. If you're actually on property, they'll give you better mortgage rates on it. So that sounds all really good.
So if you're a small business owner, has a profitable business, and you're expanding, and maybe you need a real estate look, and maybe it does make sense to go buy a commercial building. You rent that building or use that building and then sublease some of the rest of it to help offset the rent.
And think about this, like we are in that specialized service that gets excluded from QBI. We don't get the 20% for the 199A. If we owned real estate, all of a sudden we get the 20% benefit. So there's definitely some pros there. But let's talk about the cons. Large down payment, guys. They're going to want you to put down 20, 25% on this stuff. And since buildings are expensive, it's going to take a big chunk of money. You go back the truck up.
I was going to say the barrier to entry, generally speaking, in most markets is a lot harder to get into commercial property than it is residential property. It's just a bigger nut to take on.
And then the other thing, like automatically, real estate potentially is not liquid. It could sit on the market. You got to get real estate agents and others people. There's a whole transaction, recording fees. The problem with businesses, I go and look at commercial real estate all the time. You'll see businesses, buildings that sit there for over a year because they're very specialized buildings looking for the right business to come and make use of that. So there might be a long period of time that the property could sit vacant between tenants. And then it's harder to sell and turn that into liquid cash.
Yeah, they don't move as quickly as residential properties move.
Number 5, private real estate deals.
Yeah, so this one is a little unique. So this one is kind of where you enter into a real estate partnership most often, where you want to be in some sort of private deal where you have other investors that partner along with you. You pull your money together and you go invest in real estate, whether it be single pieces of real estate or diversified pieces of real estate geographically.
So it's typically like general partner and you're a limited partner.
Right.
And by the way, this one does kind of resemble passive because you find the right to, but we'll get into it. But it is one of those things where you could potentially set it and forget it if you do your due diligence on the front end, and then hopefully collect in the background.
Yeah.
That's what you're hoping for, so it does allow some form of passive investment if you connect with the right general partner. And by the way, this has changed. When I first graduated college, I worked in public accounting. Everybody knows that. And I remember that one of the first CPA firms that we were doing work, these were deals that investment advisors as well as other real estate people would go and kind of organically put together professionals.
Sure. They'd
have a general partner that's kind of overseeing it, taking a management fee. Now we got all these crowdfunding that has kind of jumped into this. It's much easier through technology, where there are now groups that will put these deals together. And look, and even some of these, I don't consider this completely, but in some cases it is. This is where you have to be careful. The dumb doctor deals label comes in because doctors get pitched private placement deals all the time. You have to be qualified, accredited investor. All this can offer some opportunities, but it can be expensive.
And one of the things we talked about, Brian, is there are a lot of different types of private deals that you can get into. So even while it may be passive once you're in it, making the decision to get into it generally is not passive. You need to kind of vet that to make sure. And one of the things that you said, and I've heard you counsel clients on this, whenever you're thinking about entering into any sort of deal as a limited partner, you ought to have a conversation with the general partner to ask them how much skin do they have in the game. Is their money actually on the line as well?
And if it's not their money, how much of mama's money is in the deal? Because I want to know, anytime I'm dealing with a general partner who's putting together deals, going to be collecting a management fee, you want to know how much of their own money, how much of their own net worth, and how much of their family members are tied into the deal. And then you want to know what the fees are.
That's
Get a complete accounting of all the fee details, because there's usually going to be multiple elements. There's going to be their ongoing annual management fee. There's also going to be a participation rate, because at some point, this property is either going to get refinanced or get sold, and that's when it's going to be a cash out event for you, the limited investor. You just want to make sure, do you get all of that, or is there going to be a split where if there's any rate of return over a certain high water mark that goes back to that general partner? You just need to make sure you understand all the fees. And then also know that, like, I've seen deals where we were doing fast food joints. I've seen deals where we're doing apartment complexes. I mean, these things can take all forms. Just make sure you know the risk profile and what these people are actually doing and what their track record. Because if you do find the right one, it could be good.
Absolutely.
But pay attention to the details.
It's
not set it and forget it. And then this is the last category, and I put this on last is because we kind of went in order of what most people do with home ownership, passive portfolios, and then we got into single families, then the commercial, then private real estate deals. The last one we put on here is the shot across the moon. This is where you're really trying to hit land development.
Yeah, this is the thin air. Not a lot of folks fall into this one.
Well, it's much more speculative because it is. I mean, it's one thing to go see a big plot of land and go, that looks like money right there. And in a lot of different ways, because big money, here's the pros. I'm talking about one deal could potentially set you for the rest of your life. And that's the moonshot here.
And we've seen that happen.
Yeah, I've seen people become incredibly wealthy by just being in the one right deal that kind of set them up. Now, look, it had tremendous risk to it. And what I mean by that, because it all ties in. It's all built onto the same equation, because the same benefits that give you the moonshot is also the negatives that cause this thing to be so high risk, is because you got a lot of leverage. Usually you're not doing this straight up with cash. You're doing this with the leverage. And then the other thing is the logistics can be a hot mess. I mean, local governments with zoning, planning and zoning, all the environmental tests you have to do when you're developing, whether it's residential or whether it's commercial, all this stuff, you're having to deal with a lot of hands. That's why you'll do contingencies. It's not going to be a fast-moving process.
And then how about even all the infrastructure that has to go into it, depending on what type of property you're developing, whether it's residential or commercial, it can be pretty involved in terms of all the different, you have to kind of be an expert at all the different pieces of it to make sure it works really well.
Utilities, amenities, the roads, you know, there are a lot of things that are going to get sorted out. So you're going to make a lot of people money. You're going to make your attorneys who are dealing with all this, the engineers, the architects. I mean, there's all kind of people that will be dealing with, you know, being this developer. But it's the whole part of where I talked about it's not an overnight success. This could take years to develop, and this also leads to, it's not uncommon for real estate development to have a boom or bust type cycle where you'll see people make a lot of money or go broke because it's so speculative. And that's what led me to, this is the thing I think is amazing about multiple deal businesses, meaning that they constantly are doing real estate development, is that I'm amazed, and it goes back to some of that tax favored stuff with the 1031 exchanges and other things, is that you keep reinvesting all of your gains into bigger and bigger deals, and you're just hoping the music doesn't stop before you get your big payout.
I've actually asked some folks to do that. I said, what are you working towards? Because all I want to do is make sure my last deal works. That's the whole goal of it, is I just want to make sure the last deal I do is the one that works. And I'm like, what if the last deal you do is the one that doesn't work? You gotta, you know, this is for a different type of investor who's willing to take on this sort of risk.
There's a reason we said the 6 types of real estate investing. We want to cover it all. We want to cover something as basic as you owning your own primary residence, all the way to the moonshot of you're doing real estate development and really loading it up and putting a lot of money out there. Real estate does go up with inflation, and owning a home is a great way to protect yourself. But I think there's even easier ways. We like to talk about REITs. I mean, you can own rental property, you can do commercial property, but if you just want the easy way, I mean, you can just do REITs, and we even have some research to show you what does that look like from a historical standpoint.
Yeah, we went and looked at the investment returns of real estate relative to inflation from 1972, you know, pre-hyperinflation, all the way through the end of 2020. And what's interesting, this shows every year, if you're out there on iTunes or iHeartRadio, we actually have a graph that shows every year annualized what the return was on real estate and then what inflation measured that year. So from 1972 all the way through 2020, inflation averaged about 3.9% per year. That's the average rate of inflation we saw over that roughly, 50-year time period. Real estate, on the other hand, actually had returns of 9.2% annually. So the price of goods rose by about 4%. However, if you were invested in real estate, the value of your dollar actually rose by about 9%.
When you look at this visual that we've created here, and for those that are out there in the podcast world listening to it, this thing looks like an EKG with the real estate doing way above inflation in years, and then there's about 5 years over this 50-year period that actually real estate just took a nosedive.
Sure.
It was very volatile. Those are those down markets that you see with real estate from time to time. So a lot of you looking at this visual will be confused. You'll be like, well, is this actually good? Because based upon this, it looks like that inflation is much more stable, whereas real estate is all over the place. And that's, by the way, that's like any investing. We always talk about the walk up the mountain with the yo-yo. Every year that you're a diversified investor, you will have some form of volatility, but your goal is to capture enough good years, because there's definitely, remember, 80% of the time, you're going to make money 8 out of 10 years. 2 years is typically out of every decade. There's going to be down years. This kind of fits to the T if you think about that. You know, we've got 5 where we went below 0, approximately a 50-year period. This is even better than average of 1 out of every 10 years. But if you bring it and it's actually stacking what you get to keep each year above and beyond, the separation is huge.
Yeah, so what you can see is the value of a dollar invested, or the value of a dollar eroded by inflation. It's really interesting. So if you had a dollar in 1972, over the course of the 50-year period, it's going to lose about 4% of purchasing power per year. However, your investment in real estate gains about 9% per year. So what you get to keep in terms of real purchasing power is the differential. So the value of your dollar, even with inflation happening, increases about 5% per year by utilizing real estate as an investment.
But I think this is a great life lesson too on it's okay to have some risk on assets that will outperform inflation because you get rewarded for that in the long term. The separation from 1972 through 2020 between inflation and what real estate has done is substantial.
Next question is from Tucker Investing. If you're on step 7, does that include investing in real estate? And so he's referencing step 7 of the financial order of operations, which is hyperaccumulation. So is that where you should start real estate investing, or could it be sooner? When should you start putting your money into real estate instead of the market, or should you? Like, what are y'all's thoughts?
Well, Tucker's asking a great question. By the way, he's really close. I mean, if we were doing horseshoes, he'd get at least 3 points. Or maybe a point, because it'd be, wouldn't be a ringer. But it's I look at, if you look at the 9 steps of the financial order of operations, when we talk about step 7, hyperaccumulation is really talking about the 3 bucket strategy, meaning you got your after-tax investments, that's like your brokerage accounts. You've got your tax-free, which are your Roth accounts that you are funded with after-tax dollars. So you don't get a deduction on the funding, but you do on the growth of the accounts. And then you have your traditional tax-deferred accounts. You're trying to make sure you have enough money in all 3 buckets. And what we use from a cash flow perspective is, are you saving 25% of your gross income with traditional investing and traditional type of accounts? I consider real estate to be a step 8 of the financial order of operations, because this is one of the things. I love real estate investing if it's the whipped cream and cherry of your investment, foundation, because it's one of those things you've got to get the basics right. And this analogy is not perfect. You guys know where I'm going with this, because I've had people, everybody skips. They skip the Roth, they skip the health savings account, they skip maxing out their employer retirement plan and getting all the match. And then, but they read an article, or they saw a social media, or they saw a YouTube channel where somebody is flipping houses or doing Airbnbs, and they think, this is what I need to be doing to create wealth. And yes, real estate, we are real estate investors too. That's why we get a bad rap when people say, y'all don't know real estate. I'm like, we know real estate more than most people, because we do residential as well as commercial. And that's the part, I call it for unlawful carnal real estate. Okay. Now listen, y'all know where I was going with that, is because look, because when we bought our first big commercial real estate, we had somebody I have a lot of respect to us come to you and say, boys, I hope y'all got enough money that when it gets ugly, you don't lose it.
Yep.
And that's why I can say for unlawful carnal real estate is because you better do it right, because if you don't, that acronym turns completely the other side that we all know we're not allowed to say on air. And that's the part, because you better have the deep pockets, because real estate is great because you're using leveraged debt to amplify your rates of return. That is outstanding while everything's going great. But as soon as things go bad, man, you get caught. I mean, that tide goes out and you are naked right out there for everybody to see. And that's where you get yourself in a lot of trouble. So I'm just telling you, you're going to remember what I talked about here. And you're going to know, am I at that point that my pockets are so deep that I can go take advantage of what real estate has to offer me?
So I'm going to reiterate one thing you said. I'm going to add one new thing to it. I agree. Real estate should happen later on in the financial order of operations. And I think one of the things that people miss is they try to get into real estate before they have a foundation built, right? Well, you have to be, just like Brian said, you got to be deep. So I want to see you with a really healthy portfolio built up underneath you before you start getting into the real estate decision. Well, then people always say this to me, this never fails. Yeah, but I'm missing out. And so this is the first question I ask. Hey, do you own a home? Yeah, I own a home. How much you go up last year? Oh, it did good. What about the year before? Oh, it still did good. I said, you're a real estate investor. You may not realize it because it's a use asset, but you have real estate exposure. You're already doing that. So what's the reason you want to get into other real estate? Like, what's the thing that you're looking for? Is it just because you think it's going to be some magical solution? Because people say this all the time. Hey, got to get into real estate. Give me some of them deductions. I hear there's deductions in real estate. I'm going to save a bunch of money in taxes. Yeah, if you're a higher income individual, that's not exactly the case. The reason you get into real estate needs to be like a well thought out, well reasoned decision. I mean, we have many friends of the show. Charles is the one that I'm thinking of right off the bat, who does a lot of real estate investing. But you know what he didn't do? He did not start his investing journey doing real estate. He built up a foundation and then he moved into that once he was able to support doing that. So make sure you don't get out of whack. Make sure you don't get yourself out of order. It's why we have the financial order of operations. If you start adding and subtracting before you start multiplying and dividing, you're not going to get the right answer unless you just get lucky. It's why we have it there. But I don't think real estate is bad. We're not anti-real estate folks, just in the right time, for the right reasons, in the right circumstances.
It is definitely not the type of investment or asset that you want to fake it until you make it.
That's right.
Because, man, if you get caught being a faker, it can break you.
I'm saving money to invest in real estate. Should I put the money in an index fund until I have enough? And should I max out my 401k before I do that? So it does not sound like she or he is buying their first primary residence. It sounds like this is for investment opportunities. This is for buying, I'm going to assume, rental real estate or something like that.
I consider real estate to fit into steps 7 and 8 because this is hype. This means that you have now reached a level of success that you have deep enough pockets that your retirement probably is on track. You have liquidity with savings and emergency reserves that you can weather the storm that comes your way. And it didn't neglect the free employer match. It didn't neglect the tax-free benefit of Roth IRAs, health savings accounts, and maxing out your employer retirement plan. All those things were respected, taken into account, as well as the 2 emergency reserves with step 1 and 4. You are ready to rock and roll at 7 and 8. So that's the first answer, is if you're trying to figure out max out retirement or real estate, I'm going to tell you max out retirement because you haven't made it to the steps of financial order of operations. So then say you have. Now you're trying to figure out, hey, I'm going to have to build up just like we bought this commercial building. It took years of income and savings to actually have the down payment to make that happen. Here's where that falls into. Is it anything that you need to touch in the next 5 years? Doesn't need to be in any financial product like the stock market, the bond market. It needs to be pretty liquid.
Yeah, now I'll give you a little bit of a pass here because I know for a lot of folks, when they are thinking about investing in real estate, they don't often have a specific piece of real estate targeted, right? So because obviously, if you're thinking about buying real estate, but you got to save for 2 years to have enough to buy it, odds are it won't be for sale at that time. So a lot of folks say, hey, at some point in the next few years, I want to invest in real estate, so I'm going to save separately for that goal. If your goal likely could stretch beyond 4 to 5 years, I don't think there's anything wrong with sort of a middle of the road approach where you are building up your cash. But if that real estate purchase might not happen for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, it's kind of silly right now to let cash just be sitting at relatively low interest rates, not doing anything.
True.
So I think that you could do a mix, still build up your cash, but you could have a very low-cost index fund or conservative balance fund where you're building those dollars over the next 3, 4, 5 years, and that way it's a best of both worlds approach.
Here's something. I'll just give my own personal experience share on this, is that I know when we wanted a commercial building for this business. I got to a point where I'd already made it through the steps 1 through 9 on the financial order of operations. I did let I did a balance. Exactly what you said is that I let my cash build up higher than what was required in steps 1 and 4, emergency reserve side. But then I also didn't want to have just cash go so big that it was sitting there and not making anything. So I had gone a balanced approach where what I did was I chose a ceiling for how high I wanted my cash to get. That I was like, anything above and beyond this level, and it was way up there.
There's no point.
There's no reason in keeping that much cash. So I started dollar cost averaging more money into the investments, but I kept that because that cash reserves that I had reached, so you can customize this to your own situation, not only takes into account your emergency reserves, but also an opportunity pot.
That's
so
right.
in case the right piece of property, in case we hit a bear market or something where you can go and take advantage of that, I wanted to put a cap on how high even I wanted that opportunity pot to be. So then I would create a systematic investment plan above and beyond that.
This question is from Joseph. He said, right now, housing market's crazy. Everything's expensive. Everything is wild. Maybe we can't move, right? Maybe moving is not an option anymore. So instead, we're going to think about doing a renovation. We're going to think about doing a remodel. We're going to think about making our current house the home we want to be in forever. This is Joseph's question. Is there a recommendation on how much money to spend on home remodeling? Is it like a percentage of net worth? How should I go about thinking through that process?
So I think it's not how much. I think it's where you're spending the money.
Okay.
In the house. We've done some content, probably been years ago, and things run together after a period of time. But,
Probably been years ago, means it's like probably 10 years ago.
yeah, I know. We have done it, but I would focus on, we know, first of all, the easy stuff. The biggest bang for the buck that you get the highest rate of return, meaning that when you go to sell the property down the road, you get your money back out. The easiest thing first, paint. I mean, paint is cheap. It's more labor intensive than it is cost of materials. That's something even, you can do yourself. But then after you get past the basics of just the aesthetic stuff like the paint and trim and little things like that, now you focus on where in the house. And that's where the kitchen's always important, because that is the central hub of your house. Have you ever noticed when you, have any type of social thing in your house, I don't care if you think it's going to be in the living room or family room or wherever you think it's going to be. If the food's in the kitchen, that's where the people are going to be. So focus on the kitchen, focus on the master bedroom and bathrooms. Those type of things are very important. So the where is a focus. But then the second thing is just pay attention to, are you getting too specialized? Here's what I mean by this. You will find, because you need to think about this from a financial standpoint, not from the emotional side, is that when you start, and I'm now up to my third house that I've built from the ground up. You will get overwhelmed with the decisions, and it will be this way with projects too, is that you'll be like, man, for an extra $1,000 or $1,500, I can buy this version of tile or get this cool design in the tile on the backsplash, or this, I can put a different edge on the countertop, that was, for $2,000, they'll put this cool thing that makes it look like it's a piece of trim. You need to ask yourself, when you combine all these things together, are all those upgrades really adding ultimate value to the thing, or were these personal preferences? Because the bad thing is, when you go to sell, sometimes personal preferences don't translate. They don't have a return on investment. If you were so excited because the marble you're using on the floor of your bathroom came from Italy, that probably doesn't translate well when you can go buy at Home Depot or Lowe's a fake, marble that looks, now look, you will potentially, because it's a higher quality, but it is one of those things you need to always balance, be a financial mutant to figure out, does this truly translate, or am I getting too specific where I'm importing things in and the market's just not going to recognize that value? And it's also, if you're doing things that are so unique, I'm always amazed when I'd go look at kitchens. When before we built our house up here in Tennessee, we thought we were just going to buy existing home. Sure. And I was amazed at what people would spend their money on with, like, maybe a pizza oven gets you money, but what if I don't want a pizza oven, or a movie theater in the basement? What if I don't watch it? Some of those things, or even the swimming pool in the backyard. Now, look, this pandemic has created some weird things, but realize some of those decisions I just talked about, they might be 50 cents on the dollar of everything you spend versus getting the full 100%. Now, I know the pandemic's made things unique, but it's uncommon that forever we'll be in a period where if you put your house in the market without due diligence, you'll get 20 offers. That will come to an end at some point. So make sure you are well connected to the reality of what happens when things aren't in these unique times.
Let me ask you a question related, and I don't know the answer. Normally when I ask you questions, I kind of know your answer. I don't know your answer for this one, so this will be a fun one. When it comes time to do a remodel and like do that sort of stuff, how do you balance like using debt to do a remodel versus like saving for cash to use a remodel? Does one or the other always make sense? Are there times when you should like kind of Like, any thoughts on that? I mean, just if this is something Joseph's thinking through.
I mean, it depends on your financial situation. I mean, it's and look, that's why I always come back to the financial order of operations. I mean,
it's great.
If you've got good emergency reserves and other things, and you're flush and you're having a hard time figuring out where to deploy your cash that's in the bank, you're probably not going to use debt. But I also understand some people, you're maybe in that messy middle where you have a great income, you have a great career trajectory, but you just can't get it all fit in, but you know this is what this house needs, especially in these unique times, to make it where it's usable for you and your family. Then I think but being reasonable about what that budget is, I think it's okay to use debt as long as you have a plan, because there's a big difference between like a home equity line versus a home equity loan on when the term, because we're in a very unique time where interest rates are still low, but there's every indicator that things are going to start getting a lot more expensive. So if you are going to use debt, you better know what your risk is on it going up to make sure that maybe is there a way I can cover that while I'm paying this stuff back, because all that comes into play.
All right, we do have a real estate question from Benjamin on YouTube. He said, is buying a duplex as a first home a good idea? With renting or Airbnb on the other side of the duplex, is there anything that I should watch out for? Now, this is something, I'm seeing this as a trend, like on TikTok and different things. They're calling it house hacking. Yeah. And it is kind of a genius idea in some ways, but is there any considerations that he needs to think about beforehand?
I actually love this idea. Now, I want to tell you is the only thing you need to consider is look at where because you hear it on real estate all the time, location, location, location. So sometimes duplexes, I just know in a lot of communities where you get into multifamily homes and stuff, it's not, and look, I'm basing this off of where I was in Georgia and other things. I'm just giving you the considerations, is that you need to think big picture, is that where I'm buying my house, what's the why, what's the purpose? Am I living here as a single person or as a newly married person, and this is all I have to think about is financially, does this make sense? Because having somebody pay half of your mortgage potentially through, or even more than half of your mortgage by renting from you is very exciting. But I want you to think about, if you don't buy houses unless you can be there for 5 to 7 years. And if that 5 to 7 years you think you're going to get married and start having kids, you need to start thinking about, hey, is this going to be in the area where I want my kids can go to school? And if there's not good schools in the area, that might, now look, you have the potential, you could turn this into an investment property fully after you've lived there a few years. But I'm just saying, I love the concept, but make sure you're taking and writing down on paper or creating a plan for what will happen in this 5 to 7 year period that I have to commit to buy this, and does it work financially? I love, because it's great. I mean, we're doing the same thing we bought a building for the business recently, and I love the fact that we're going to now be paying rent to ourselves. And when you house hack, you kind of do the exact same thing. You're paying yourself rent, but you also have rent coming in from your tenants. I know people, you don't have to stop at duplexes. You can have triplexes, quadplexes. We have clients that have it all. It's a great thing because, depreciation and other things help you on your taxes, but just make sure you still are respectful of where this falls into the financial order of operations. You're not going too far out on the leverage side of things without having enough liquidity to get you through those dry periods.
Josh says, I will be buying a house, and I currently own a condo. Mm-hmm. What should I consider when deciding if I should rent out the condo or just sell it and invest the money? So I remember when I was in college, Brian, there was this book, I think it was by David Bach, called The Automatic Millionaire. I may be getting that wrong. But it was this idea of I buy a house, and then when I buy my second house, I just keep that house and I rent it. And then when I buy my third house, I just keep those last 2 houses and I rent them. And then when I buy and I just keep those and I just keep renting it. How do you decide if that should be your path, or, okay, I've got this condo, I don't need it, not gonna live there anymore, I should sell it, take the capital, and then just invest that in the liquid markets in my portfolio? How do I go about making that decision?
There are a few things you need to take into account from a tax planning standpoint. And this is something I'll just, because I've had this scenario even for myself. I moved from the state of Georgia to the state of Tennessee, had a primary residence. It was interesting to me is I had to rent it originally because the market wouldn't support me selling it, meaning that there weren't a lot of houses being sold in my house. I sold it in 2019. And then what happens? Real estate market goes crazy. So, I mean, but let me give you the actual details here. It is great to turn your primary residence into a rental piece of property if there's not appreciation, because there is a really quirky little carrot that is put into the tax code for people who have primary residences. And here's what that carrot is. Because remember, home ownership's a good thing. And I always talk about tax code as a carrot and stick approach. They want to encourage people to own homes. Your primary residence, if it appreciates, single people can exclude $250,000 of gains. Married couples can exclude $500,000 of gains. And I remember when this tax policy came out, I was like, who has $500,000 gains on houses? And then this year happened with huge inflation on houses that you're seeing. I mean, if you live in the right neighborhood, your house might have appreciated $300,000 just in the last year.
That's right.
So this tax, you need to pay attention to how appreciated your condo is, because if it's got a $250,000 to a $500,000 gain, and I don't know if you're single, married, whatever, you've got to pay attention to that, because there's not many things that the government says is going to be a completely tax-free transaction. Now, maybe you got into a situation where it's not the right time to sell, so you're going to rent it. Does that mean you've completely foregone the tax-free gain? The government did take this into account. Here's the way the rule reads. It had to have been your primary residence for 2 of the last 5 years. Yep. So there is a chance, there is a planning opportunity that you potentially could move out of the house, rent it for up to 3 years if the timing works out perfectly, and still exclude the gain. But you're going to have to make a big decision when you get to closer to probably between year 2 and 3. You better figure out if you want to unload it, because if you continue to treat it as a rental property, you will be walking away from that tax-free gain opportunity.
You know, and we say this all the time. You know, the interesting thing about like financial planning is that all the decisions you make aren't purely mathematical. Mm-hmm. Some of it has to come down to, what do you ultimately want? Some folks have no desire to be a landlord. They don't want the phone ringing at 2 a.m. when the water heater goes out. And they don't want to have to figure out who's going to cut the grass. And they don't want to have to change light bulbs. And they certainly don't want to pay a management company to do all those things. So you have to figure out, what do I ultimately, you know, what are my ultimate goals? Do I need cash flow coming in right now, or would I be better served if I had this money in my portfolio working for me, especially if I can make a couple, you know, a large gain that's completely tax-free? I think you have to begin with the why before you even start backtracking into which one is the right decision, because it could go either way. For two people in the exact same situation, for one person, it may make sense to keep the condo and rent it out. For another person, it may make sense to go ahead and sell it and capitalize on that gain. So I think there's a lot of unique things you have to take into consideration about your specific situation. I don't know that this is one size fits all.
No, it's definitely going to be individualized to your risk tolerance, how handy you are, and all kind of other factors. If you live in the same state or community as where the rental is, there's so many things we didn't even cover in this answer. Real estate gets complex, and that's one of those things. I mean, but look, that's why we tell people take the relationship to the next level, because we talk to clients about this type of stuff all the time.
This is from Melanie, and I think a lot of people are asking this question right now. My husband and I plan on upgrading to a larger home this year. We have 3 kids now versus 1 infant when we moved in. So the family's gotten larger, and they're thinking about changing homes. We will likely net additional money on the sale of our current home above the 20% down payment required. What should we do with this money? I'm 41 and my husband is 39. So a lot of folks now are selling houses for numbers that they just didn't even think were possible. And for the next house they want to move to, they have enough equity that they cover well above the 20% on there. What should they do? How should they think about it? If you can't tell them what to do, like be prescriptive, what are some things that they should think about? Like, how should they go about approaching that decision-making matrix.
This is so unique, Bo, because a lot of people will troll us and they'll say, man, I hear you guys, you say don't prepay your low interest debt until you're over 45. Well, under that logic, you probably should go ahead and load up and even take a home equity line to invest in the market versus the house. And I'm always like, no. Because here's the difference. Is that, first of all, you don't want to have all the transaction costs of real estate. Real estate is far from cheap to buy and sell and take debt out on. And then I don't like people taking home equity lines because usually there's a lot of variability to that interest rate. And just like rates are low now, there's nothing that says in a few years they're not significantly higher.
That's right.
And now you've blown up the whole risk profile as rates adjust. But for somebody like Melanie, this is unique because more than likely, when they upgrade into the new, bigger house, they put down 20%. They're going to lock in a fixed rate mortgage because historically we're in super low rates. What do you do with the extra money? Do you put it down towards the house or do you take it and invest it? We can't, and Bo alluded to this, we can't give you the specific answer because we don't know your situation, and that's more of what you would do for a client. I would encourage, Melanie, if you're at a point of success that you and your spouse need to take the relationship next level, consider reaching out to moneyguy.com or aboundwealth.com and taking the relationship to the next level. But I can tell you in general terms, if you're ahead of the curve, meaning you're great with saving, you're respecting the 25%, you're doing really good, you could look at this as an opportunity that maybe you have from a risk standpoint. You could invest this, but if you look at this and you're like, man, that extra money is going to let me catch some things up because I maybe have some debt, student loans, some credit card debt. I don't know your situation. If you're behind, this could be a situation to go look at the financial order of operations, catch yourself up to see if there's a way to get back to level. This is an incredible opportunity for you and your spouse.
The only thing that I'd add to that, if you do fall on the camp of, you know what, we're young, we're 41, we're 39, let's get these dollars working for us. Whatever strategy you implement, I would go with a conservative one, right? And here's what I mean by that. Right now, market's kind of down a little bit this year so far. So someone might say, oh man, I sold my house. This is so great. I'm going to take all that equity. I'm just going to go throw it in my portfolio. And that may work out well for you. And the Vanguard studies would suggest that lump sum does indeed beat dollar cost averaging over the long term. However, what you don't want to do is go put the money in the market and then all of a sudden something happens we don't see, right? The market goes down 15%, 20% from this point, and you're stuck there saying, man, I can't believe I made such a boneheaded decision. Why did I invest those dollars? I should have paid down my mortgage more, got a lower payment, yada, yada, yada. Whatever you do, if you decide to put that money to work, I would really consider a dollar cost averaging strategy with those proceeds. So you sell the house, you get into the new house, make sure you've covered all the other expenses, the lawnmowers and the, whatever stuff, if you got to decorate new rooms or buy new furniture, make sure all of that's accounted for. But once you truly know your excess, put together a plan where maybe if it's a substantial sum of money over the next 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 months, you just steadily introduce it into your portfolio. And that will remove the sting of not knowing, oh, did I make the right decision or did I not make the right decision?